sound good if there's something at every frequency range. You want to have some instruments down here. You want to have some instruments in the middle. You want to have some instruments up here, and you want to have instruments up there. That's why a rock band usually sounds good. Because a rock band has low frequencies, the kick drum and the bass. It has the mids with like the heavy guitar. It has the upper mids and the highs with the vocals. And then it has the high frequencies with the cymbals. Right? So it has all of those frequencies filled in. If you have all of those frequencies filled in, your mix is going to sound good. If you have too much down here and nothing over there, your mix is going to sound bad. Okay? So, pay attention to the room. Right? Pay attention to the mics. Pay attention to the arrangement. Right. So, if someone came up to me and asked me to mix the song and go, I got 30 guitars on this song, I'm going to give it back to them and go, I can't do it. How can you mix 30 guitars? You can't. 30, you're going to have 30 guitars right here. It's going to be a complete mess.
I give up there.
It's going to be a complete mess. I got a song and I got 27 channels of like synthesizers. I don't want that job. Because you just don't physically. How are you going to make 27 synthesizers come out of a speaker this big, and you're going to be able to hear everything? No, it's not going to work. So the arrangement is also going to determine how good of a mix you have. If you got a bass and you got drums and you got keyboard and guitar, well, then things can kind of be spread out. It's like a string quartet. You got a cello, you got a violin, maybe two violins and a viola. Why? Cello, violin, cello, viola, two violins. You got to spread, you got to even spread. So together when they play, they're going to sound good. You don't have four violins sitting there chugging away, right? And even in a country band, usually you got one fiddle. You don't have two people playing fiddle. You got one person playing fiddle. Usually, if you're in a jazz band, most of the time they either have a piano player or a guitar player. Rarely do they have both. Because if you have a piano player and a guitar player, yeah, because everybody is too much. It's too much information in the mid frequencies. If you have a rock band and you have two guitars, those guitars very rarely play the same thing. Usually one guy is down low going, and the other guy's going, right? They're not playing the same thing. They're playing in different frequency ranges. The guitar and the bass go good. Why? Because they're an octave apart. You see? So you want things to fit. You don't want to have everything sitting in the same range. Pay attention to the arrangement. Why? Because that's going to just make the mix really good. If you have the right arrangement, you need very little EQ. When I record a jazz band, I really don't EQ anything. I don't EQ. I do the drums a little bit. Because of the kick drum. I remove energy from the kick drum. And that is about it. I'll compress we'll talk about compressing it. I compress the upright bass to make it stable. But I don't EQ. Because usually like a jazz band, a quartet, the arrangement is good. You got drums and bass, then you got keys in the middle, and then you got a horn up top. So the arrangement is pretty good. And the musicians know to stay in their space. So recording jazz bands are easy. It's the easiest recording job to do and easy mix. Rock bands are pretty cool too. You got to control them now. Because the guitar players want to turn everything up as loud as you. Come on, man, I gotta feel it. And it's just the opposite. When you record a rock guitar, it's better to get a small amp that's very quiet and record a quiet amplifier. Because the quiet amplifier actually will sound bigger than a big amplifier super loud. So remember that. A lot of these guys, you go to see them in the studio and they got this little tiny amp that they're recording out of, and it's super quiet. Everybody's talking and they're sitting there wailing away. You can get a bigger sound out of a smaller amp. You don't need to turn it up. Again, you turn it up, it's just kind of ridiculous, you know? The hardest stuff to mix is the EDM. The EDM stuff is so hard, man. Because they got all these effects going on, and there's 27 keyboards, and it's just like, you know, it's hard to figure out where to put everything and make it all work, you know? So the EDM stuff is like the most difficult, actually. And so, yo wanti ma. Yo wanti.
I was actually about to ask the electronic music, but I guess that's the EDM part, right?
Yeah.
Like even like because I saw like a huge modular pieces and putting them together.
Yeah.
Like that's the same thing, right?
Yeah, that's the electronic, the world of electronic music. Mixing it is difficult because oftentimes you have tons of instruments in the same frequency range, and so how do you get separation from all of these instruments all playing like middle C? It's just like it becomes difficult. And so you got to use a lot of filters, a lot of EQ. It's a lot of work. It's a tremendous amount of work, you know. So it's tricky. It's tricky.
So another question is when you talk about the like rock band, right? Like you're recording the guitar, you actually put the microphone. That's the analog style, right? Can you actually directly record digitally, meaning there's no speakers, it directly goes to
Absolutely.
And which is better, yeah.
What's going to happen, what happens to the size of the recording if we do it all digitally? You see? So if I do it, and it depends on what the client wants. I mean, if they want a digital recording, then yeah, but if they come in with a Metallica CD and they go, I want to sound like Metallica, I'm gonna go, okay, dude, we gotta mic everything, because we're gonna get a bigger. If you want to sound like Green Day, we gotta mic everything so that we can get that super big sound. You know, if you go direct, you're gonna get it'll sound cool. You know what I mean? If you want that particular sound, there's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. And a lot of times when I'm doing demos, I plug in directly. I have like a guitar module. I plug into the guitar module goes to the speakers, and we just work things out. But if I'm going for like that Green Day, Metallica, super big, you know what I mean, Nirvana, then, you know, I'm a run a mic and, you know, put
That's
a couple
pretty much the difference when we were there, right? Hearing the different
Dwayne.
things, right?
Dwayne, I played Doja Cat, and then I played that band Toto, and the band Toto was like, and then I played Doja Cat again, and it went, right? It's not that Doja Cat sounds bad; it sounds great, right? It depends on what flavor you want. What flavor do you want? Do you want that crisp, tight sound, or are you looking for a big, you know, the jazz guys want the big stuff. Some of the hip hop cats, they want tight. They just want drums and which is, you know what I mean? They want it tight. So one isn't better than the other. It's just different. And knowing how to get that difference. Is important. And knowing that there is a difference. Being able to know that there's a difference. For me, it's a little bit easier because I'm just old. So, like, seriously, I'm just old, you know. I was a kid in the 70s. I'm 55. So I was a kid during the 70s, so I remember listening to music in the 70s. And then I was listening to music in the 80s. And I was listening to it in the 90s and the 2000s. I heard it change. When I was a little kid, when I was 5 years old, I used to have records, you know, listening to records. You know, then, you know, when I went to college, we're listening to CDs, you know. Then, when I started working really professionally, now we're listening to MP3s. And so I could hear how the music changed. And so for the young kids, I like to play the older stuff so that they have a sense of reference of how how, you know, why were people listening to all of those discs? Why, you know, because there was a certain quality to that older music that was actually quite good. Those recordings are big. Those recordings sound really, really big, you know. But if you don't listen to them, you might not know that. You might miss that point. Because we just all kind of listen to what's going on right now a lot of the times, right? So the older, those analog recordings are just big. So depends on what they want. If they want a digital recording, you know, and yeah, the good thing about being able to plug into a box and then being able to get the sound out of your speakers is you can do it in your bedroom. So that's awesome. Like years ago, you couldn't do that, right? So that's super awesome, right? Yeah, so it's cool, right? It's all good, dude. However you can make it work is good. You know? Okay. Any other questions? Check out Warm Audio. Also, let me give you guys some good advice. Two things. One, anytime you buy some equipment, they usually give you like some information about it. Read that information. Because inside that information, they're going to teach you how to use the equipment. Like when you buy a microphone, especially if you buy like an AKG microphone, they're going to go, hey, if you use this microphone on the kick drum, put it 40 centimeters in front of the kick drum. That number is super important. How else would you know? Like, how do you know to put the microphone 2 centimeters above, or like the overheads 184 centimeters above? How do you know that? You know it from reading the information that they give you every time you buy a piece of equipment. There's super important information that they tell you. And those numbers are important. It took us 100 years to figure out we should put it 40 centimeters in front of the kick drum. That just comes from hundreds of years of doing it and stuff like that. So read the information. Also, when you go to this website, if you look up a microphone like a U47, there's going to be the U47, and then at the bottom of the page, there's going to be all of these magazines that write about that write articles about that particular piece of equipment. Go read every single one of those articles. Because they're going to tell you in those articles, they're going to tell you the history of that microphone. They're going to go, yeah, the original U87 was invented in 1940, and then they're going to go, L. Schmidt used it, and this and that. You're going to get all of this information about engineering just from reading those articles. So read those articles. And they're going to say, in this microphone, it's best to use it on vocals, and if you use it on vocals, do this. And it's good to use it on bass guitar, and if you use it on bass guitar, do this. So a lot of engineering, a lot of what you learn from engineering is going to come from the product information. That's how you're going to learn how to engineer, by sitting and just reading all of the information that you can get on it. You'll learn 20 years of information in a couple of weeks, right? Because there's this history. There's a long history of engineering. We've been recording since like the 1930s. Where is that information? Usually they include it with the products. So I got hundreds of PDFs, right? Because I download the articles. And I just read them, and I go, oh, that's how they did that. Oh, you read it, and you go, oh, that's how Metallica recorded the drums. You go, oh, that's so good. You know, oh, that's how I need to record. That's how Adele recorded her vocals. You're reading it, and you're going, yeah, Adele used the UA. She used the U47. True story. Adele uses the U47. She runs it into the Universal Audio 610, which has a 2 preamp and 1176 compressor. And then I think she runs it into a C1 compressor. That's her sound. How did I learn it? I'm just reading an article. Oh, shit, okay, I got Adele's sound. So now I go, okay, I need to get this microphone. I need to buy that preamp, because now I know how to get Adele's sound, right? And so you go to that website. There's a lot of information on engineering at that website. If there's a microphone, pull up the microphone, go to the bottom. There's going to be all these articles. Read every article. Read every single article. Because you're going to know, your favorite singer, you're going to figure out, oh, this is the microphone that they're using. Oh, this is the preamp. They're even telling you how to set it. They tell you like tons of stuff, right? So important. And if you buy something, read all the information that they give you on when you buy it. Because they're going to tell you how to use it properly. They're going to tell you the distance or the this or the that. Okay? How are we doing on time? 现在什么时候？
4.
40? Okay. Okay. 还有问题? Any questions?
So, like, I used to listen to some Japanese rock, Japanese pop, and I think that their mixings like sound so sharp. They don't like the low voice.
It tends to be super bright. Yes.
Yeah.
It tends to be super bright and super brittle.
It's a little bit weird for me.
That's just their style. I'm gonna sit down, my feet are hurting. That's just their style, right? And you bring up a good point. Every city is gonna have a different style mix. So, I was born in New York, from New York. So in New York, the New York sound is lots of compressors, tons of compressors. So for vocals, we'll take our vocal track, we'll bust it over to another track. So if this is the vocals, we'll do this, and they call it daisy chain. I don't know how to say that in Chinese. Here's my vocals. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna send it over to another track, and this is like gonna be an aux track. In Logic Pro, it'd be like an aux track, and we send it over to the aux track, and then we put on that aux track, we put 4 compressors. 4 compressors. And then both of these tracks, we blend them together. We call this daisy chain. It means you're going to put a bunch of compressors on one track. Now, here's the original vocal track. We're not going to compress that. We're going to take it over here and we're going to crush this thing. I mean, we're going to crush it to no end. Then what we'll do is this, maybe we'll only add 10% of it over to that track. But it's a cool sound. It's super cool. It's the sound of New York. Like everybody in New York knows this trick, right? You know? LA is different. I studied in LA. LA, they love reverb. So LA is going to have big reverbs like on the snare. It's the sound of like all those 80s rock like hair bands, like Motley Crue and all of those, hair bands from the 80s. They're gonna put huge reverbs on stuff. So LA is gonna do this. Here's my snare drum. Again, I'm gonna bust it over, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bust it over to 2 channels. And I'm going to put a reverb here and a reverb there. Then I'm going to pan my reverbs like that. So my snare drum, when I hit my snare drum, it's in the center. But then when the reverbs fire, the reverbs are on the sound. And it makes your snare drum just sound super big. Right? So that's like the LA thing. Tennessee, Nashville, they like everything clean. So it's all about putting a mic in front of somebody and choosing the right mic and the right preamp and just letting them play, and that's it. They don't like to color anything. You know what I mean? They don't like to color anything. The point being, every city has its own style. Every city has its own style. And a lot of it has to do with the equipment. In some cities, it's easy to get equipment. Some cities, it's hard, right? If you're in LA, it's easy to get all the universal audio stuff. Why? Because the company's right in Los Angeles. You know what I mean? It's easy to get the Avalon preamps. In LA, everybody has an Avalon preamp. Why? Because they're made in Los Angeles. So it's like it's no big deal. But if I'm trying to get an Avalon preamp here, oh my God. shipping and embargoes. It's so hard to get it. So I'm not sure what's going on in Japan. Maybe they got a lot of EQs. You know, and they're just like, you know, yeah. But yeah, I listened to some of the rock stuff, and it's super bright, dude. 1K, 2K, super bright, bro. Yeah, that's just their style.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just their style.
I think
Yeah.
they just like that kind of sound.
Yeah.
Like the Yamaha piano, you know, it's super bright.
It's super bright.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
to like other pianos do. Yeah, not-
Even the mixers, even the Yamaha mixers, they're super bright, bro. They're super bright. The mixer that I have is super bright. Yeah, and so it's just their style. You know, Hong Kong has a style, especially from all the stuff in the '80s. Yeah, they have a really cool. It's more balanced. Overall, the pop music from Hong Kong in the '80s, it was all really well balanced because they had strings and they had low end, and you know what I mean. Just kind of well balanced, you know. And so every city's gonna. When you listen to a mix, try and figure out where it was recorded, and you'll understand the style that they're going for. You know, yeah. And so that's what's gonna happen. In general, I'm gonna teach. I learned in LA, so when I teach mixing, I teach the LA style. A little bit of New York, but I teach the LA style because that's where I learned. So what's the LA style? We focus on drums. Getting a really good drum sound. That's a real big part of LA. Because a lot of the music coming out of Los Angeles, especially with all of those rock bands, drums was a big part of it. And jazz, right? Because a lot of big band jazz was recorded in LA too. So like drums, yeah, my teacher we spent so much time like learning how to record drums. And so that's a big part of the LA sound. Rock and roll style heavy metal guitars. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of like recording live guitars and stuff like that, you know. Horns not so much. I had to learn how to record horns later on because by the time I went to school, the jazz era was over. I went to school in like, you know, the 90s. And so I mean people were still playing jazz, but it wasn't like Duke Ellington era and you know, and all of that stuff. So LA is big on like live bands. Pianos, vocals, that's another thing. A lot of really cool vocal tricks and stuff like that. New York, because of the timing, New York, a lot of hip hop came out of New York during the 80s and 90s. And so a lot of like drum machines, samples. New York is big on like sampling and all that kind of stuff, right? And so that's gonna be kind of that style. Hi, Owen. Yes.
Just general questions. So you mentioned the importance of the room, you know, the studio setup. But I guess my question is, if you put all your effort in that perfect environment, but that will guarantee, because 99% of people, they don't have that space to listen to music.
Yeah.
They just have a regular, you know what I mean? Like, is that, because if you push that 100%, will they get 90%, or you actually need to focus their listening environment?
You raise a good point. I would not do 100% of anything. Like nothing that I do musical am I ever going to do 100% because it's never really going to translate to that, you know. And so most of the time, you should do the best you can within reason. And then deal with whatever you got left. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. And nothing is ever going to transfer perfect. But that doesn't mean you can't make something great. Okay. The label Motown, they're from Detroit. This is the label that had Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson, the Jackson 5, Aretha Franklin. This was a record company in Detroit that basically produced some of the best American musicians of all time. Their recording studio was in a garage. So Berry Gordy had inherited a house from his parents, and he turned the house into a recording studio. The recording studio wasn't much bigger than this room. But they made, 300 hit records? And the room was kind of shit. It was. The control room was the kitchen. They turned the kitchen into they got rid of the stove, and that's where they put all the recording equipment. So they recorded Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson. They recorded them in a garage. So you know that garage was not 100%, maybe 30%. But you know what? You deal with what you got. You deal with what you got. We were listening down there. I got 2 different speakers. That we're listening to. I broke one, and I couldn't buy the same one because they didn't make them anymore. So I had to buy the next model. So I got 2 separate speakers. All right, that's what we got. So you deal with whatever you got. If all you have is a bedroom, make it work. You know? If Stevie Wonder can become great from a garage, you can do anything's possible. Anything is possible. So yeah, don't go 100%. Do what is reasonable. If you don't have the money, deal with what you got. You know? A lot of rap records were recorded in people's bedrooms. Tons of records were recorded in people's bedrooms. That's all they had. So, if that's all you got, figure out a way to make it work, bro. We used to record at the old school. I used to record on the 4th floor of the old Jz school. That was complicated. It was really complicated, man. I had to do some amazing stuff. I had to work at 10 o'clock at night because the 4th floor was a classroom. So they would have classes. So I would go to work at everyone would be leaving the school and I'd be showing up going, I got to do a recording session, right? And then we had neighbors that lived next door, because they're right next door. So we had to figure out a way to make it work. And we did. We made it work, So whatever you got, make it work, man. Make it work, whatever you got. And it's all good, yeah. And sometimes, because you don't have everything you need, you wind up doing something incredible. It forces you to figure out another way to do it, and sometimes you discover something amazingly incredible. When I was on the 4th floor, I couldn't use the main room. I couldn't use it all the time. And I couldn't leave all of the equipment set up. So you know what I did? I put the entire studio on wheels. So that when I wasn't using it, I would literally wheel the studio out into this little closet. And then when it was time to record, I would wheel the studio back out. So what did I do? Now I put all my equipment on wheels. It's easy because I can move it around and put things in and put things out, right? It's just one of those weird things that you discovered something because you had to, And so sometimes those situations where you don't have everything, they're really good because they force you to be clever, So, yeah. Make it work. Make it work. Cool. Hi, Owen. Okay, so that's pretty much what my classes are going to be about. Half of it, we're going to do art and talk about music and melodies and how to create rhythms and beats. The other half, we're going to kind of do engineering and talk about what we need to do to actually make the sound good. I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time teaching everyone things that you don't need. I'm just not that type of cat. I'm not a jazz cat, I'm a blues cat. Right? Even though jazz and blues is sort of the same thing, the blues perspective is much more practical. I need to go to the club, I want to make people dance, that's it. I'm not trying to impress people with all my technical skill. I want people to dance and have a good time. That's the blues perspective. And if I can do that playing one chord, that's what I'm doing. Right? You know what I mean? 5 notes. That's pretty much what I'm playing all night, right? 5 notes, right? That's it. Yeah, I'm not trying to play all these scales. That's too much work. So that's kind of how I teach. I'm going to teach you things that I think you need. I'm going to teach you things that I need. Right? I'm not just going to put a bunch of equations on the wall. And you know what I mean? I gave you one equation. Why? Because I want you to realize you need to get away from your speakers to hear what's going on. That was the point. Right? And the same thing. Don't spend your money on a lot of plugins. Fix your room. Spend the money on the room. Yeah, fix your room. Right? And then don't spend a whole lot of time. If it's taking you 20 hours to mix, something's wrong. It shouldn't be that complicated. You're pulling energy away to make things fit. That's it. You know what I mean? And don't spend your money on a plug-in. Buy a good microphone. Buy a good microphone. Buy one good microphone and one good preamp. And then get the plugins on Taobao. Why? All right. So I'm gonna tell you guys practical stuff. Yeah, tell you guys practical stuff. And once I finish up with the room down there, we're gonna use it. That's the best way for you to learn. I'm gonna talk a little bit, but we're just gonna do it. I'm gonna say, here, put the microphone in front of the kick drum. All right, let's listen. And I go, yeah, it's a UE7. That's why the kick drum sounds good. So I think doing it is a better way to learn than sitting in the classroom talking about it. Yeah. Cool? All right. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Thank you guys for coming. All right. And have a good day.
Yeah.